November 24th, 2016 at 12:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. From the forests of northern Massachusetts, I published Episode 0, An Introduction to Prose. So, as of, this very moment, Prose has been putting forth entertainment into the universe for half a decade. 5 whole years. Wow. Since that afternoon in 2016, the show has released 144 regular episodes, too many holiday specials to recall, a handful of bedtime stories for children amid the heat of the pandemic, and 347 original pieces of short fiction, not counting those holiday specials. On a personal level, I have had some major ups and downs, as we all have. And you all have supported the show through 3 major moves: new equipment, a handful of international obligations, countless drives to and from Arkansas, heck, I'm en route there now, a bloody global pandemic, and far more than I can possibly elaborate on without droning for far too long. To celebrate today, I thought that we could listen to the first 3 stories ever published. They're back on episode 1. So sit back, relax, and enjoy those earlier efforts. Here for the first time in 5 years are Just Earth, Lusus Naturae, and Marlboro Man. Enjoy.
Just Earth, a short story by Jared I. McGee. He couldn't believe it. Here he was, bleeding out from a piece of rebar through his abdomen on a dirty floor. Him, one of the foremost deep space jumpers, the man who was just short of a god on Mars, dying on this filthy planet, Earth. It had been at least 15 years since he was on the blue planet, as it was once called. Of course, a little over a century had passed since Lash, the third planet from the sun, carried that pet name. The human race saw to ruining that by ignoring its cries for the better part of 300 years. Industrial revolution to the Antarctic proxy wars, only 3 centuries of so-called progress wiped out the homeworld. Luckily, a handful of very far-sighted individuals sought to look beyond those darkening skies and heated days off into the distance at Mars. 2070 saw the first humans on the red planet. Not 30 years later, mass exodus from Earth would begin. And he was one of those few born on Earth that made his way to be a jumper. 10 years on Earth in the midst of squalor and his family scraping by to keep their air scrubbers running. A scholarship to the Orbital Training School for Gifted Youths, 7 years at OTSGY, 1 transitional training year on the militarized moon base of Akaboas, 3 years on world on Mars. Then he was deified, sent into the farthest reaches of the heavens to seek out even more worlds that could sustain the human race. Mars would get crowded soon enough, and God only knew how quickly they would ruin what terraforming had stuck on the once living, once dead, now living planet. He was the first human to set foot on Titan, dispelling myths and rumors that all the intel on the moon had all been wrong. Humans would soon be watching those famed rings from their front lawns, if you could call those dusty patches of homesteads lawns. He then crossed the celestial Styx in the deepest jump any of his kind had ever made, establishing a self-contained biosphere on the massive mountain on the formidable Charon. Every time the people said it could not be done, he did it. Every time the scientists debated the hows and whys and if we cans, he simply went out and made fantasy reality. Every time the human race thought it had limits, he expanded their vision even farther into the depths of the starlit expanses of the solar system. At 30, he was getting a bit old for the major jumps, but he had been promised this first leap beyond the confines of what is quaintly called the solar system. He would be the first galaxy-class jumper. Well, he and his fairly extensive crew, but he would be the prime. He would call the shots and set his feet down on whichever rock they found that could potentially play host to this invasive species he called his own. All of these accomplishments were rushing back in a torrent that seemed like another lifetime. But he knew that this was just a trick of the dying mind. His eternities of living and reliving his life were seconds of Earth time. He had felt the cold of cryo, but it had nothing on this most biting and bitter of frigidities. And what for? Another drink when he should have told the bartender he was finished for the evening? A smile and a wink and a caress of the shoulder, of the small of the back of a pretty but inevitably backward and antiquated Earth girl? He had not even stayed to fight like a respectable man when her male companion decided he didn't approve of his interactions with her. What was her name? Andromeda? Such a royal name for such a plain place, but then again, everyone on Earth had the names of gods and goddesses and myths and heroes these days. They had to look to the stars and the delusions of old to keep them sane on this bedimmed Tellurian sphere. He wasn't here for any noble purpose. He had simply come back to bask in what he'd escaped. Instead of fighting, he stumbled out of the ramshackle bar, laughing at how ridiculous this palace of anachronisms was. He chortled as he tripped toward the downward slabs of broken stairs. These living fossils, grasping at old faiths, old lives, and the ghosts of what humanity once thought it was, were beyond comedic to him. They were pitiful to the point of hilarity, so he laughed and laughed. Right up until he, in this moment of superiority and celebration of his own evolution and godhood, tripped over his feet, sending him sprawling down those dilapidated attempts at stairs and into a salmagundi of loosened masonry from some long-forgotten and long-abandoned construction project, only to land back down and face up on a javelin that had waited for him for 30 years. This modern angel defying God was here dying alone on a fossilized world that didn't even have the good sense to know it was dead yet. Another flash of his jumps. Another. They were comforting to him in this strange, putrid place, there in the dark of an obsolete world. He took solace in knowing that, even in this most ignoble of deaths, he would be remembered a hero. He would be jettisoned into the slowly dying sun, as all jumpers were. And then, as is befitting major heroes of his ilk, his face would go up in everlasting diamond sculpt somewhere, most likely Karen, so he could face outward to those jumps that were meant to be his, but now never could be. He would remain a shining beacon, looking ever forward toward progress and the continuing expansion of the human race and the perpetuation of his life's work. He smiled and let go, warmed by this final thought of his own greatness. Internal Jumper Program Report. System Jumper First Class Ezekiel Phaeton Jatayu was killed on Earth under unknown circumstances. Despite high blood alcohol content in SJFC Jatayu's talk screen, local authorities suspect foul play but currently have no suspects. They are working on collecting additional evidence. SJFC Jatayu has one sister, Phoebe Jatayu, living on-world. Remains have been released to Miss Jatayu, as SJFC Jatayu has no other living relatives. Will not be granted a jumper's release. Miss Jatayu is not comfortable releasing his body for solar cremation, and the High Command has no objections to his burial on Earth. No posthumous honors or distinctions will be granted at this time. The track behind this short story is theme for an unmade space film by Gelsonic and is being used under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike license. Theme for an unmade space film comes from Gelsonic's album Various Moods. More information on Gelsonic and its founder Jeremy Ray can be found at gelsonic.com/royalty-free. And for loads of great free music, visit the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The sound effects in this story are provided by Tristan Lohengrin and Full Boy Media, both accessed through freesound.org. To get in touch with Tristan Lohengrin, go to tristanlohengrin.wix.com/studio. To get in touch with Full Boy Media, go to fullboymedia.co.uk. These sounds are also being used under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike license. As always, thank you for listening to this short story by Jared I. McGee. Please keep your eyes peeled for more short stories to come. Lusus Naturae by Jared I. McGee. Mark couldn't quite look her in the eyes. After 5 years, admitting his failures here and now was far more difficult than he'd ever thought it could be. He loved her. He did. That much was apparent to him. But he knew that there was no going back to the love that they'd shared up until today. No, not today. It had been at least a year since last they'd shared the same life. For 4 of those 5 years, Lydia and he had been more than lovers, more than cohabitators, more than friends. They had been the stuff of poetry and myth. Their relationship wasn't bad, and Mark couldn't quite put his finger on the precise moment when his eyes moved past hers and toward the horizon. Unlike the movies or programs on television, there was no single world-shaking point that pushed Mark into someone else's arms. Certainly, the apathy of Lydia toward, well, everything didn't help matters, but he couldn't stand by that, and only that, as a justification for his actions. In the end, he knew that his decisions were his own. He was a primal monster, organically designed to spread his genes. These desires to move beyond one partner were not but a biological joke on those that would be consummate monogamists. The swirling morass of social and chemical cues in Mark's body turned him, like many men and many women, into a Jekyll and Hyde figure, a person fighting a losing battle against their own inner nature. On his explaining to Lydia that Janine was nothing more than a deviation from the norm predicated by these drives that were in such conflict with what he considered what he wanted, Mark was met with tears, with anger, with wailing, with someone so despondent that he saw the woman he knew disappear before him. He tried to comfort her, but she wouldn't have it. She would not let him touch her. The last words she screamed at him as she left, never even to return for her belongings, would define him for the remainder of his life. They would serve as the underpinnings for every relationship he would have with a woman until his death. "You're a monster, Mark! A goddamn monster!" And so he was. And so he ever would be. You have just been listening to an original short story, Lusus Naturae, by Jared I. McGee. The track behind the short story is Camille Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre by Kevin MacLeod, and is being used under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike license. A collection of classical tracks recorded by Kevin MacLeod under the Creative Commons Attributions license is available. Famous pieces by well-known composers including Strauss, Tchaikovsky, and others settle in nicely among Kevin MacLeod's own compositions. These can be found at incomptech.com. And a great deal of wonderful free music is available at the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. Thank you for listening, and please keep your eyes peeled for more original short stories coming from Jared I. McGee. Marlboro Man, a short story by Jared I. McGee. Breathe in, breathe out. Take a drag, exhale slowly. Breathe in, breathe out. Take a drag, exhale slowly. She could hardly see the man shackled to her grandmother's old rocking chair. Meemaw would probably not approve of her beloved rocker being used as a cell of sorts. But, then again, Meemaw was long gone now and had not seen the ugliness that this modern world has to offer. The trial of Joseph Spurtaw had been a quick one. The police work and collection of evidence had been marred by misuses, abuses, and every blunder an investigation could possibly have. Working with this banged-up collection of corrupted findings, the prosecutors didn't stand a chance. The 12 souls charged with weighing Spurtaw's innocence acquitted him in less than half an hour. A monster was free to walk the world again. Breathe in, breathe out. Take a drag. Exhale slowly. Breathe in, breathe out. Take a drag. Exhale slowly. Spurtaw looked a great deal less arrogant now than he had the day he left under the police guard to begin preying on the world again. The left corner of his thin, china rose lips opened just a bit wider now. She'd used her pinking shears to make him smile a little wider. Multiple burned-on pockmarks spoiled the beautiful light mocha skin that so many women had complimented after Spurtaw shot to fame in the wake of his sensational trial. Nasty women grasping for part of that fame. Her cigarettes were doing a nice job of reminding Spurtaw how to feel, how to fear. Breathe in, breathe out, take a drag, exhale slowly. Breathe in, breathe out, take a drag, exhale slowly. The air was almost entirely opaque now. This living, breathing demon was as weak as a babe. He could not even raise his head, nor could he resist her. 5 days she'd already held him, 1 day for each child. The prosecutors alleged that there might have been more, but in her opinion, that could not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. She was fair, after all. Her justice would not be tarnished by overreaching. Day 6 was here, and she would release this man from his pain. Breathe in, breathe out, take a drag, exhale slowly. Breathe in, breathe out, take a drag, exhale slowly. In that thick, hellish smoke, she moved to liberate him. Thank you for listening to Marlboro Man by Jared I. McGee. The track behind the short story is Johann Sebastian Bach's Prelude in C, as performed by Kevin MacLeod, and is being used under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike license. A collection of classical tracks recorded by Kevin MacLeod under the Creative Commons Attributions license is available. Famous pieces by well-known composers can be found alongside Kevin MacLeod's own compositions. These can be found at incomptech.com, and for loads of great free music, visit the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The sound effects being used are to be attributed to Karahakaku, Louder Noises, and Studio Bada, and are being used under Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike licenses. These audio artists and many more can be found at freesound.org. And again, thank you for listening to this short story by Jared I. McGee. Please keep your eyes peeled, as always, for the next short story.
Well, that does it for this little marking of a milestone. Please refresh your feeds later today for one of those holiday specials I alluded to earlier. Until the next time, love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is. Always stranger than fiction. Thank you so much for listening these 5 years. Here's to a few more.